There we go. All right. Hi, good morning. Wow. We're finally here. We're finally ready to go. A little bit late, but that's OK. I'm super happy to be here. As Mary said, I have done this conference both of the times it's been happening in London, and I'm really excited that we're doing this in New York. I told them it would be a great place to get a lot of tech talent, especially people who are interested in growing in leadership. So I'm very happy to be here. This talk has gone through many different iterations. This iteration is called the elements of scaling. So let's go ahead and get into it. The elements of scaling. Scaling teams. I love to talk about scaling systems, but for this conference, we're going to talk about scaling teams. And a lot of people think that the right way to scale teams is to hire a bunch of 10x developers, that mythical beast, that mythical creature. And that would be great if you could find a bunch of 10x developers if they existed. And if when you got a bunch of 10x developers working together, they were all still 10x developers. Unfortunately, if those people exist, they're best kind of kept apart from one another. Otherwise, yeah. So this is to talk about management instead. To get us kicked off, a couple of quotes about management. The key to being a good manager is keeping the people who hate you away from those who are still undecided. Casey Stengel said that. And Dwight Eisenhower said a quote that's very useful for me. I wish I'd heard it 5 years ago. You do not lead by hitting people over the head. That's assault, not leadership. So, OK, who am I? Well, I was the CTO of a company called Rent the Runway, rents designer dresses and accessories like this lovely dress that I'm wearing today. I hope everyone here who is a local New Yorker at least has heard of it. Great company. And I was there from 2011 to 2015. I helped grow the team from 15 to 65 people. So I learned a lot in that time period. I learned so much that I wrote a book. So a quick plug for the book that I wrote. It's called The Manager's Path. It's about all of the sort of growth stages that most people in engineering leadership and engineering management go through. There's a lot of stuff about how to stay technical while managing. Because I think that's really important. When I first started managing, so I spent a very long time as a senior developer, individual contributor, staff engineer type person, if you're familiar with that term. And when I first joined Rent the Runway, I actually joined as the director of engineering for their infrastructure team. We were doing a big rewrite out of this Drupal PHP monolith into Java services, and I led all of that. I wrote a lot of the code. I did a lot of the architecture. And I had a team, and this poster basically summarizes what I'm like when I am both hands-on and managing teams. I'm very focused on technical quality, and I have certain standards that I hold my team to. If you do not test your commits, I will bury you. This literally was printed up and hung up by my desk. So this is kind of my style. This was my style, and it worked OK. As a very senior engineer who also happened to be managing, this style worked OK for me because I was mostly working with other senior engineers. I didn't have a giant team to worry about. However, about, say, a few months into my time at Rent the Runway, we had what I would call a cultural seg fault. The person who hired me, the SVP of engineering, left the team. And that was not awesome, because he had hired most of the people on the team, and everybody really liked him. And he had taken care of all of that people management and team management stuff. And we didn't really have anyone waiting in the wings to take his job. So, of course, I raised my hand, and I said, boss, put me in. I can do this. I'm charming. I'm smart. I've managed some. This wasn't my first go-around at team management. How hard can this be, right? This is why you go to a startup. You go to a startup so that you can get these opportunities to stretch yourself and grow. And the CEO was like, well, I guess I'm not sure that I have any good options here because I was the most senior person left on the team in terms of management experience and seniority and time at the company. So she said, OK, for the interim, you can be the head of engineering. So I was really stressed out because it turns out managing a team, even a small team, that is the entire engineering team for a whole company, is a really hard, really stressful job. You have to deal with upper management. You have to deal with the CEO. Reporting to a CEO is a weird experience. It's not at all like reporting to someone who is technical. It's very, very different. You have all kinds of stresses on you. You have to learn how to manage people who do things that are different than the things you do, like QA or operations. And we were a startup and things were not super stable still. We were still going through this rewrite. So I was really stressed out, but I thought I was doing an OK job. And so I went to my very first review with the CEO. And I'm sure she said some good things. I don't really remember what she said. I mostly remember that she told me that I was creating a culture of fear. Yeah, culture of fear. That is not a thing you want to hear in a review, right? That is a pretty horrifying thing to hear in a review. In fact, I was kind of stunned because I knew that I was hard on people. I knew that I had high standards, and I held developers to high standards. And by the way, I had come out of finance where, at least the finance company that I was at, it was like okay to sometimes yell at people when they were doing wrong things. That was a management style that was acceptable. Apparently, that's a bad management style. So this, for me, was a huge wake-up call. This was a huge wake-up call for me because it made me realize, oh, this is not good. I don't want my career in management and leadership to be known as the person that everyone's afraid of. I knew I wasn't going to retain a team. I knew that I wasn't going to build the kind of culture that I wanted to build, creating a culture of fear. So I spent about the next 3 years unwinding all of that and figuring out how to create a culture of trust and trying to figure out what I needed to do to improve things and create a team that was engaged and motivated and happy and loved coming to work every day. And so I'm going to talk about 4 things today. This is not all of the elements of scaling. There are a lot of different elements of team scaling. But these are 4 big things that I learned in the process of scaling this team. The first being all around removing bottlenecks, helping the team move fast. The second being around how do you create healthy structures that make sense for the team, that don't feel too heavy and they don't feel too opaque or confusing. How do you create a team that cares about one another, that has a sense of relatedness and community? And how do you deal with conflict in a healthy way so that you can actually have some disagreements but not have constant strife? So I like to start with speed. I like to start with getting rid of those bottlenecks because I feel that most engineers really appreciate this. We all appreciate that getting things done and being able to get things done is really important for engaging engineering teams. So I mentioned that we did this big rewrite from Drupal PHP into Java services, and we actually also rewrote into this sort of Ruby API front-end layer. And it was actually, for a rewrite, went pretty well. I'm very proud of what we did as a team. That's a very hard thing to do, a successful rewrite for a product that's in flight. But of course, it was definitely not perfect. Nothing ever is. And one of the things that we really screwed up was that we made the front end really, really complicated to release, really complicated to deploy. So, this is like 2012, era. We are still very much website-based. Web is really important, and releasing the website is how we get new features out to our customers for the most part. And we had over-engineered, and you don't even need to read what's in these boxes. You can just see all those lines and connections. Like, this was sort of the hairy ball of wax that we had created for front-end dependencies. And so we were releasing once a week. And it took many hours to do it, and it was a real pain. And it suffered from that problem that all once-a-week releases do, or less frequent, where someone would say, OK, I'm cutting the release branch. And then someone else would be like, wait, just 5 minutes, please. I just got to finish this feature. My PM's going to kill me. So you wait 5 minutes, and then you wait another 5 minutes. And then an hour later, they get it in, and oh, guess what? They broke the build. So now it's like, oh, no, let me fix that. And 3 hours later, you're finally getting the release started, and it takes another 3 hours after that. It was a mess. We all knew it was a mess. So, the team was already planning to make this faster. So we're in code freeze. The team's going away. They're working on making releases faster. And a couple weeks into it, I was like, hey, you know what? Why don't we do this? Not only make the releases faster, but let's aim to release once a day. OK? Once a day. Not quite continuous deployment, but way better than what we were doing. And the team said, sure, we can do that. So put in some feature flags, did a little bit more work. And we turned this ability to release once a day on. And it was amazing. It was like an immediate improvement in the motivation and morale of the team. Surprise, surprise, engineers like to ship. Engineers at startups really like to ship. One of the hardest things about becoming a manager is that your feedback loops get really long. As an engineer, when you're writing code, you have really short feedback loops. And that's a good thing because that's how you learn, that's how you feel good, you knock things off your to-do list. When you can't get your code into production, especially if you are building consumer-facing software, you don't get that, that little dopamine hit of being like, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. That's an awesome thing to feel. And when you make it easy for people to feel that, they are more motivated. Generally speaking, your team wants to feel like they get to do what they do best at work every day. Not 3 days a week, not every other day, every single day. And what most people do best at work is write and release code. They want their code to be done, right? They don't want to be spending days and days waiting for a release to happen or negotiating hairy, broken build bits. Some people do. Those people are awesome, hire them. But most of them don't. What we really learned from this was a few things, like letting people move quickly is good. It also releases this unnecessary bottleneck. We had this unnecessary constraint, which was release frequency, that everyone was having to coordinate around. And coordination makes scaling hard. That's true in systems, that's true in humans. So when we made it easier to release, we released that coordination. We made that coordination much less of a burden, and we let people be a lot more autonomous, right? You miss today's release, you can get into tomorrow's. It's not that big a deal. You don't have to be constantly negotiating for that tiny little window of time when you can actually get your job done. So my advice to all of you is that one of your roles as a team leader is to be impatient on behalf of your team, to look for those bottlenecks in the way that work is done, and never be satisfied with, well, it's slow, but this is the way it has to be. That is true maybe 10% of the time, maybe. But the other 90% of the time, if you spend your time as a leader focusing on the ways that your team is being slowed down from getting their work done, that's both an interesting technical task a lot of the time, and it is an opportunity for you to make their lives a lot better. So that is speed. Okay, element number 2, structure. I'm always a little hesitant to talk about structure. I read a blog post where they did a bunch of interviews with startup people, and they asked them what they thought about structure. And the words they used were things like unnecessary, slow, bureaucratic, innovation crushing. That was a good one. So I'm always a little hesitant when talking about structure. Maybe I want to talk about learning or transparency instead, because these are actually really important elements of structure. The thing about structure is, of course, that it is inevitable. Complex systems are pretty much always built up from simple systems, becoming more complex over time, coming together, right? Structure accrues as our companies grow and scale. And there is no reason that structure and or process are bad things. They are simply things. Sometimes they are poorly implemented. Sometimes they are well implemented. Sometimes they are appropriate for a while and then they are inappropriate. Good structure is like guardrails that help you focus on the interesting work at hand and not have to worry about everything else in the world, right? Your engineers should not have to worry about every single little detail of everything going on around them to make decisions about the work that they need to do today. So good structure is about helping people focus on what's important for them to do. Structure is going to be a thing that's going to evolve and change over time. Most structure sort of comes out of learning, right? We grow, our company grows, our software grows, something goes well, something goes poorly. We learn from that. We adopt a new structure, we change a structure, we change a process. Structure is really an encoding of previous learning. But it's best when it's transparent. If you know where structure came from, if you know how that process evolved, you're probably going to feel a lot better about it than if it's something that is just like this opaque bureaucracy that you have no idea. It's going to the DMV, it's dealing with your taxes, right? You have no idea why it evolved this way. It just is, and you have to deal with it. Structure mostly, though, successfully comes out of learning from failure. This is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, a famous structural failure. It stood for about 40-some days, 43 days, I think, and failed due to wind shear, right? Now, a lot of engineers think, well, if this structure failed, that means we don't need it. We shouldn't have it. But I'm pretty sure that they did not make people kayak across this river, Pacific Northwest. No, they learned from that failure, right? They learned from that failure. They encoded those learnings into building a better bridge, and they moved forward, right? So the best lessons, failure is actually one of the best teachers. Success is a very poor teacher. When you're successful, you can be doing a lot of things wrong and not really learn from them. I am somewhat well known for a structure, the Rent the Runway engineering career ladders. Many of you may have seen these. If not, you can Google them. They are, a career path for engineers and engineering managers set out into levels, and they came from failure. When I started at Rent the Runway, we definitely did not have ladders. We did not have levels. We had a lot of people with random titles. And the HR team was, at some point, was like, look, we're doing a lot of hiring. We need to figure out what levels we're hiring people in at, what levels we need, how much we're going to pay at these various levels. We don't want to have to renegotiate every single salary sort of from scratch. We kind of want to have a notion of how much we pay a senior engineer or whatever. And so I did what most people at the time did when their HR team said, hey, you need to give us some career levels. I went to my friends and I asked them for theirs. And so I started with something that looks like this. This is not the whole thing. But it was very lightweight. I got it from my friend who was the head of engineering at Foursquare, a very good friend of mine. And there are a lot of things I like about this structure. I like the different attributes. I like that, I liked the actual levels that it encoded. It was very low on details. And that was intentionally done because his idea was that by being a little bit vague, people wouldn't be obsessed with their level. They wouldn't be obsessed with getting promoted and moving forward. They wouldn't be obsessed with who's at what level. And they wouldn't be used to have people at more senior levels shut down and silence people at more junior levels. It's a noble goal, in my opinion. Unfortunately, at least for us, it did not work at all. So we rolled this out, and it was fine for the HR purposes of recruiting and setting up pay bands. It was not fine for the purpose of making people not obsessed with their levels. On the contrary, it made people way more obsessed with their levels. They were so obsessed because they were like, what does it mean? What does it mean that I'm an engineer 1? I don't understand how to get to engineer 2. This is not specific at all. Why am I not an engineer 2? I think I'm doing all of these things. It turns out that this lack of transparency, this ambiguity, made people very anxious. So we went away and we created the ladder that you know today. And you can see the snippet. It's way more detailed. And I'm not going to leave it on the screen because you will all just sit there and read it if I do. And there's a lot of words, and you can Google it. It's online. We went away, and I went away. And the second time we did this, I included a lot more people in the process. So it was not just me asking my friends. It was me and a bunch of the other senior engineers and directors of engineering on the team. We got much larger, much wider buy-in on creating something, and we put a lot more detail into it. And it was such a painful process that I put it online for everyone else to use so that it would be much easier for everyone trying to start their own to have something that was at least somewhat thorough to bootstrap from, even if you don't go with it. And in fact, it's been used by companies all around the world. So I'm really happy that this turned out so well for everyone. So, transparency and learning from failure. This is how we create good structures. And the lovely thing about being in tech is that we fail all the time. So things fail, things break. There's a new term for the blameless postmortem you may or may not be familiar with called the learning review. I'm a big fan of this rebranding because I do think that the point of a postmortem, the point of observing and cataloging a failure is not necessarily to find all the root causes. It is to learn from that failure. You have many opportunities to learn as an engineer in your retrospectives and your learning reviews. Take those opportunities to not only look for technical root causes or that person just really screwed up and they're the root cause. That's a terrible way to do a postmortem. Take the time to interrogate the structures and processes that went into this process and say, maybe there's a process change that needs to happen. Maybe there's a structural change that needs to happen. One final note on process. Process should really be helping people figure out what needs to be done. Process is not awesome when it tells you exactly how to do it. If your process is an exhaustive set of checklist steps, think about whether you could automate that, because humans are really bad at following long, detailed recipe instructions, and they're really good at, sort of having general guidelines as to what needs to be done. Computers are really good at following exact checklists. All right, so the next area is relatedness. Relatedness, feeling of kinship, feeling of belonging. The thing that is missing, if your idea of motivation is Daniel Pink's autonomy, mastery, purpose, you are missing relatedness. This is really important. Do not shortchange relatedness. Relatedness is feeling like you're part of a team, you're part of a group, you're part of a tribe. And I was really bad at this when I first became a manager. Surprise, surprise, I created a culture of fear, come on. I was a really good, very focused engineer. For a very long time, I came into work, I was super focused, I went to the gym at lunch, I didn't talk to anyone, don't talk to me when I'm working out. Went back to work, was super focused, and left. I sacrificed relatedness in the name of efficiency. I didn't do a lot of coffees, I didn't do a lot of lunches. And that was okay because I was an individual contributor working with a small team. I got to know the people I was working with well enough. But when I became a manager, this caused me a lot of problems. This tendency I had to be straight down to business. We're having a meeting. What are the issues? What are the problems? What are we talking about? How are we going to solve them? Go, 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 go. That actually undermined my ability to create connections and relatedness with my team because I wasn't taking any time to get to know them or treat them like humans. That was a problem. It turns out that one of the fundamental elements of successful teams is vulnerability, is psychological safety, feeling like you can take risks and make mistakes and ask questions in front of your colleagues. And you do not have to trust me. This thing here, this 5-step thing, is from Google. Google has some of the best engineers in the world. They have tens of thousands of them. They have a ton of teams. They have a ton of interesting projects. So you can set up almost the perfect set of circumstances in which to test, okay, if you get all these amazing engineers together working on interesting stuff, what makes some teams still perform better than others? It's probably not IQ. It's probably not 10x engineers. Turns out, psychological safety is a key core element. Do these teams care about one another? Can they be vulnerable in front of one another? When they can, they perform better. When they can't, not so much. So how do you get back this vulnerability and get back this safety? Well, one important thing as a leader is to model the behaviors that you want to see in your team and model the sort of values that you want to have. Learning how to apologize is really important because learning how to apologize is learning how to say it's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, right? I'm sorry. I'm sorry I made a mistake. I'm sorry I screwed up. Apologize for your actions and move on. Right? I'm sorry you feel that way is not an apology. No. I'm sorry I hurt you is an apology. I'm sorry you feel that way, not. Getting used to doing this and doing this publicly, fortunately, as a leader, the first time you run a big team, you are likely to make some mistakes and have some things to apologize for. I had plenty of practice doing this. This shows your team that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to feel guilty about something that you did and to admit it and then to move on from it. When you don't show people that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to feel guilty, they internalize it into shame. So guilt is I made a mistake, I screwed up. Shame is I am a mistake, I am a screw up, right? Shame is very corrosive, very undermining of vulnerability. If people feel shame in making mistakes, they are not going to feel safe being vulnerable in front of one another. The other thing I had to learn, and the other thing I encourage all of you to start practicing, is just taking a little bit of time when you get in a room with people, when you have a one-on-one, when you see someone, to ask them, how's your day? How's your weekend? How's your dog? How's your marathon? Get to know them as humans. This is not the same thing as becoming their best friend. I would actually discourage managers from being best friends with the people that are on their teams, but you should care about those people as if they are fellow humans. Surprising thing will happen when you do this. Surprising, okay? Even if you don't care, if you start asking, you will start to care. You will start to care, and they will start to care about you. This is the core of relatedness, is feeling like somebody cares about me, and I care about them. That is an important element in smoothing the challenges that are inevitable in any team. Any team, you're going to have days when you can't get anything done, when you're frustrated, when you're mad at upper management. And if you feel like you're part of a group that you really care about, that helps smooth out those peaks and valleys a little bit. It also helps us when it comes to one of the biggest challenges that I see people having in their companies, which is dealing with conflict. A lot of startups right now seem to have a big fear of conflict, which is kind of weird. People my age, I think, probably remember the days when we were way too into conflict. There seems to be a bit of a fear of conflict right now that, if people disagree, if people see things in different ways, that's bad. That's a sign that like my vision is not being shared. We aren't like a clone army, or we're not cultural fits. But conflict is just inevitable. You have a group of people, you're going to have different perspectives. That's like a guaranteed thing. And if people aren't sharing their different perspectives, then you're just not getting them. That's not to say they don't exist. You're just not hearing them. And we need that conflict. We need those disagreements to draw data out into the open. However, of course, some of us are maybe a little bit more into conflict than others, such as myself. One of my nicknames at work was the Hammer. This is a fitness hammer that was my going away gift from Rent the Runway. So as you can imagine, I don't have a problem with conflict. In fact, I kind of enjoy debating and arguing and getting into it with people. That is a bad habit as a senior leader, because very few people are going to be willing to really get into a heavy, heated debate with their boss who can fire them. So, okay, some people are afraid of conflict. Some people are way too eager for conflict. What do we do? Whichever of these you might be, maybe you're neither, replacing conflict with curiosity is the solution. This is the solve. Asking people, wow, I'm super interested. You have a very different perspective in this, and I'd love to hear more. Honestly, not like leading questions like, oh, but did you think about? Oh, but what about, well, actually, well, have you considered? No, honestly and earnestly asking them, wow, that's interesting that you have a different perspective. Let's talk more. I'm very curious about why you see this issue so differently than I do. Ultimately, one of the things that I see as a real indicator of teams that are struggling is teams that have very boring meetings, right? If you have meetings that consist of groups of people who have little to say until after the meeting, right? If that describes most of your meetings, you have a problem. You may have a problem that you have too many meetings, but the common solve, I think, for engineers is like, oh, we have too many meetings. Or the common solve is, oh, well, we need to have a lot more structure to our meetings so they're more efficient and we know exactly what we're covering. And sometimes both of those things are necessary. But sometimes, actually, what you need to be doing is you need to be using your meetings to discuss real issues, to use that trust and relatedness that you have built up over time, to have real, honest conversations about challenges or interesting problems that the group is facing. Meetings are the highest bandwidth communication opportunity that you have. You have to coordinate a bunch of people to get together in the same room or over the same video conference, right? You're coordinating that synchronous communication. But there's a reason that humans do this. It's very high bandwidth to see someone's interactions, to talk to them face to face. Make that count. So to summarize, move fast, learn from your failures, care about your colleagues. Don't waste your time in a place where you can't have real, honest discussions and ask real, honest questions. As a team, we contribute more as the whole group than we do individually. So creating good, healthy teams, this is your multiplier. This is your creation of 10x value. If we are willing to stand fully in our own shoes and never give up on ourselves, then we will be able to put ourselves into the shoes of others and never give up on them. As a quote from Pema Chodron, one of my favorite meditation teachers. If you take nothing else away from this talk, please take this. Empathy is a learnable skill. I promise you, if you just start asking people about themselves and pretending to care about people, you are almost certainly going to actually start caring about them. Almost certainly. And what is the point in scaling your team and scaling your company if you end up in a group of people that you hate? And that is it. Thank you all very much. buy my book if you're interested. Here's some links to various things, and yeah, all from me.